And so this was very interesting because it opened their eyes to that. So
Right.
I really believe that we should start with small things. Let's analyze this process. Let's see what we can get from it.
Welcome to Process Pioneers, the show that takes a deep dive into the minds of decision makers, key influencers, and process experts who are pioneering the world of everything process.
Welcome to another episode of Process Pioneers. My name is Daniel Rayner. I'm the host of Process Pioneers. And in each of these episodes, I have the absolute privilege of sitting down with different BPM practitioners. If you've been following along the series, you may have been following on for a while now. I think we're up to in our episodes in the 70s and possibly even 80s shortly. But we've been interviewing a range of different people from different spaces, different spheres, from the academic realm through to consultants and people working internally at organizations, but all around this topic of business process management. And how do you go about this topic? How do you tackle this topic? How can BPM add value, bring real tangible value to the work that you're doing? And today I had the absolute privilege of sitting down with Flavia Santoro. Now, Flavia is currently working at the University of the State of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. And Flavia has also been part of quite a number of publishings around this topic of business process management, including 31 journal articles. The numbers could be slightly off now, but from what I could see online, 31 journal articles, 116 workshop papers, a book, and a couple of editorships. I'm really excited for this interview. Flavia knows a number of the people that we've already interviewed and a few of the people that we are yet to interview, including the likes of Marcello La Rosa and Will van der Rols. But I'm really excited for this interview. Flavia, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for inviting me. It's really a pleasure to be here with you.
That's fantastic. And what we might do to begin with, I think our audience would really appreciate to hear or to understand your journey into BPM. So where did you get started? When was how were you introduced to the topic of business process management? And take us on a journey leading up to what you're doing today.
Okay, so I will tell you my story, my journey to here. Well, first, my first interest in research. Well, first I have to tell you that I consider myself a teacher and a researcher. So this is mainly what I do today. Right. And when I started my research, I was very much interested in the process of learning. So I started to learn collaborative systems that support learning and the project-based learning approach. So when I was studying this collaborative project-based learning approach, I decided to do my PhD. In my PhD, I decided to build a system that would support teachers and students to plan the projects that they were doing in this educational context. Right. And also the teachers and the students to plan and also to follow the activities that they were planning. So I started to study workflow systems at that time. Workflow systems were they were associated with the field of computer-supported collaborative working and learning. So that's why I started to learn this kind of systems. And then I built a system in my PhD thesis. I am an engineering. I have a PhD my PhD is in engineering and computer science. So I'm very much focused on technology. So I built this system, and then I got very much interested in this topic. And since I was interested also in learning, I started to also study knowledge management and organizational learning. And then I got into BPM. So so this was my kind of journey. So these two topics was never out of my life. So I started so BPM and learning and knowledge management, everything together took me to my main research interests today in the field of BPM, which is called the knowledge intensive processes. So now my main research topic is knowledge intensive processes. And of course, I relate these topics with the digital transformation processes and also with ethics. So I'm very much interested in ethics today, in ethics in processing and information systems in general. So this is basically my journey to BPM topic.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. And when you talk about ethics in business process management, can you expand on that thought for us? Because I can't say that has popped up in any of my interviews before, and I think our audience would like to understand a little bit more about what you mean by that.
Yes, I think ethics, of course, is a very relevant topic. It has always been. Ethics is related to life, to the way we live, to the way we conduct our actions in the world. So ethics is present all the time. But especially now that the systems are kind of invading our lives, we don't live without systems anymore. We are here now because it's possible, because we have this kind of systems.
Yes.
And mainly also because of the effects of artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence brought this sentiment that we have to speak about ethics and to speak about the way systems are changing our lives. So I think we have also to discuss this in the BPM field, because when we talk about BPM, we're talking about process, and we're talking about how people work and how people conduct their actions most of the time. So we should talk about ethics also. And also because we now BPM is much related to, as all of the other fields, related to the use of data. So we cannot speak about BPM nowadays without speaking about process mining and prediction and this kind of techniques. So I think this is very, very much important. There are many researchers, for example, discussing privacy and how to prevent problems related to privacy when they are using data and data from processes and from the way people work. So I think this is really important. And in my view, we should do it systematically. This is something that we have to do all the time. We have every time we are talking about the work related to process, we should discuss, is there an ethical dilemma related to this? What we are doing here? So we have to think about the ethical dilemmas every time, so we can think about it, we can make our discussions and reflections about it, and make better decisions related to ethics.
Yes.
That can even these decisions can be even not to use this kind of technology. We don't we don't consider this option. So this is something that we shouldn't do, but we have to consider this. So when we are applying some techniques, and this is and I think this is really important, because everything is related to data nowadays, and we are also making everything automatic. So we are using robots. So a very hot topic in BPM nowadays is RPA. We are replacing humans and it's very nice, it's very interesting, because we don't really want to do this kind of tasks that robots can do for us. But what is the other side? On the other side, we have people who are used to do these tasks, and we don't ask them, are you interested in a robot doing your tasks? What will these people do in the future? Yes, in the future, it may be easy to think we can replace, other types of jobs will appear, and we know that. But and now, what do we do now? So we have to think about it. It's not just that the technology is fantastic. We can do many things with technology, and BPM is totally related to technology nowadays. But we have to discuss this type of things that I am mentioning. And of course, when we are trying to do our best, so we don't want to, for example, we don't want to make mistakes anymore. We want predict the processes, what will happen, how much time will we expend in this kind of tasks, what will be the next step of the process. We would like to predict everything, and it's very nice, but if we don't make mistakes, how can we learn in the future? We
Right.
know that human beings learn by making mistakes, and we are
Mm.
not allowing ourselves anymore to make mistakes. So this is
Right.
something that I have been thinking in nowadays about ethics. So this ethics is about what we do, and so I think this is the kind of thing that we should think about.
Yes, yeah, it's a good question and a good topic. I think obviously there are some circumstances where a mistake will have a bigger impact
Yeah.
than in other circumstances. I think as you were speaking, you reminded me of a conversation I was having with someone where they were talking about I think it was either launching a rocket ship. I think it was launching a rocket ship or something like that, and the process performers, the engineers or whoever it was, they ended up skipping parts of the process, and it led to a mistake. And I'm not sure whether it resulted in loss of life, but obviously there are some environments where if a process isn't followed, then it could be a lot more detrimental than, say, something that it would just be a reduction in efficiency or something like that. So it's interesting how you really do have to think through, well, what is this process trying to do here, and who is it going to impact? What are the outcomes of this? What are the risks involved, and how can we control this?
Yes, exactly. So this
And
is important to understand the context as a
mm,
whole.
mm,
There are always many different perspectives that we
mm,
should consider, and sometimes I think we don't consider all of them. So it's
yes.
important to make this systematic, in
Mm.
my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And so you would have, I'd imagine, have collaborated or worked with a number of organizations over the last 20 years in doing your research work to understand how organizations adopt BPM, what works well, what doesn't work well. I guess one question I would have is what are some of the biggest challenges you see organizations face when adopting BPM? And I think that obviously every organization is at a different maturity level when it comes to processes. And some organizations are well into exploring process mining and RPA, and other organizations are yet to even understand the process and what's going on. So, but what are the biggest challenges you see in general?
Well, I think in the in the past, maybe this answer would be the cultural aspects, because people were used to this functional model and the division of labor based on different areas of the organization. They were not used to see the process, to understand the concept of process.
Yeah.
But today, I think it's more, it's a little bit different. I think one of the big challenges is a gap in the case of the adoption of technology.
Mhm.
Because as I see here in Brazil, I think it evolved a lot, the area of BPM. A long time ago, I participated on a big project in this oil company that is a huge company here in Brazil. And we were discussing the implementation of BPM office there. So me and my team, we were modeling processes all over Brazil. So in the different parts of Brazil,
Right.
this company is present in the different states of Brazil, and the first step was to model the processes and make them understand what is a process model. So because
Right.
they had no idea at that point, and how modeling processes would be beneficial for them. And then the main goal was not only to model a process or to start this BPM office there. One of the main goals was to build what they call at that point collaborative rooms, where the participants of the process that were in the office, in the main office of the company, would interact with people that worked in the field where the oil was really extracted. So they need to collaborate, they need to interact, and they didn't know the whole process, how people were working in the different sites. So we modeling the processes, we were able to understand the process and to kind of suggest the requirements of these collaborative rooms. What would they discuss there when they were together? What they were doing at each site, and what would be the benefits of integrating all the information that would be shared in the process. So even at that time, I think there was a cultural problem, because they didn't know many things about BPM. What would be the concepts? What would be the process modeling? That we should have a repository of models that should be shared among everybody. And models would help us to define the requirements for these environments that involved the physical aspects and the systems also. But even at that point, I think that it was important to understand how this technological gap exists, because now it was a long time ago, I think maybe 10 years ago or 9 years ago, but I think it's still a problem. We have to provide supporting systems for people to work with. And I don't know, nowadays it doesn't make sense to me to do the job that I did in the past, to start modeling processes, interviewing people, going there in the field and trying to understand how they work. Because now we have so many resources that we can use to do this in other ways. But the companies are not, they don't know it, a lot of it yet. At least here in Brazil. This is the reality that I think we are facing here in Brazil. 2 weeks ago, one of the first companies here that works with process mining, and we have some Brazilian companies. This is, I think this was the first one, or at least one of the first one. They organized an event, Process Mining Day, and they invited many people. Vanderhaus was the keynote speaker, the main keynote speaker in this conference, in this Process Mining Day. And they invited people from different universities, from different companies. And it was really they were very successful in this initiative. And I think the most important thing that they did there was to promote the topic, because many people don't even know that it exists. And I received some messages in my LinkedIn talking about, I see your presentation, I would like to discuss this topic with you. So that's what I'm talking about. There is this gap of knowledge, but very much based on technology. What can we do with technology to support processes now, currently? I think this is one of the biggest challenges for implementing, at least here in my context.
Yes, yeah, definitely. No, I definitely can relate and resonate with that over here in Australia, at least. I know that a lot of organisations have been made aware of the idea or the concept of understanding and managing your business processes. But I think that there have been a lot of lengthy projects where there has been a team that have been tasked to go out and map processes over the duration of 12 months, 2 years, 3 years, only to get to the end of it and without a clear purpose or why behind what we're doing. It just ends up sitting there collecting dust because it's great documentation, but well, actually, maybe it's not so great because it's not actually being used. It's no one's looking at it, no one's improving on it. There isn't that no one's automating it or doing anything to it. It's just sitting there as this unused documentation. And so I think a lot of organizations, without understanding that there are these technologies out there, when they hear the topic of BPM, it's kind of like, oh, we've tried that. It didn't work for us. We're not going to try it again, you know, and there are these different hurdles or objections to BPM because they're thinking about how it was done 10 years ago or 15 years ago.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I think. And then and if before there was this cultural gap, because now it's not that it's not anymore. I think it's still a cultural problem, but we have added to this the technological problems also, because people don't know what technology can do for them in the context of BPM.
Yep.
And there are so many things. BPM, BPM is can be implemented in different ways. Don't you agree?
Yep.
Maybe people have this dream that BPM would be the silver bullet, but it's not. We can do small things that brings very, very a lot of advantages.
Yes. And I think what you mentioned before about communicating the value of BPM when you were working for that large oil company. I'd imagine that you were communicating the value to the process performers, the people at the different sites. Why are we here? Why are we documenting your processes? And then I'd also imagine that, I know we have listeners out there that they're in a position where they're trying to communicate the value of BPM to the senior leadership, to the C-level executive team, so that they can get sponsorship from them, buy-in, resources, so that BPM is valued and is given what it's needed to thrive, even on a small level. So I guess one question I'd be interested in is when communicating to that senior level, they're obviously going to want to understand, well, what can it do for us? What's the tangible value that it's going to bring to our organization? So do you have any, I guess, examples of where an organization has adopted BPM and that could look like RPA or process mining or different technologies like that, and it has delivered significant value? Do you have any stories you could share about that?
Yes, I have some stories. I will give you two examples. First, one company that I didn't work with them directly, but I was advising them in the background. So they were concerned with one of the processes. They had this more or less the case that you were talking about. They started some work with BPM some time ago, but it was not working well. They didn't see the advantages, and so they let it go. But then they got to know process mining. No, there's this thing called process mining. Let's see what can we do with it. And then they did this case study with one of the processes that they were having problems. They were really having problems with this process. So why not? Let's try. This was this the case, and they saw some advantages after that, because they really could understand some problems that they couldn't see before, because they were not analyzing the process correctly. They couldn't see what was really the problem, and it was so simple. It was not complex. It's just that they didn't know who was. It was a problem of who was doing what. So the problem with people, and they could understand it by using process mining. And so this was very interesting because it opened their eyes to that.
Right.
So I really believe that we should start with small things. let's analyze this process. Let's see what we can get from it. And so then they got to know that process mining was an interesting technique, and they were not, probably they were not going to adopt process mining for everything, or doing build huge dashboards based on process mining, but now they know that it can help them, and they know that looking at the process is really interesting, because they can get advantages based on it. In the other example that I have, more recently, maybe 1 year ago, I was working as a consultant to a bank here in Brazil. But this bank is kind of a social bank. It's not a traditional bank. They are responsible for the social programs here, like allowance to poor families and unemployment insurance. So they are responsible to pay to do the payments of this kind of social programs.
Right.
And there are so many things, and they have data available from millions of people here in Brazil. We're talking about I don't know 100 million people. So they have all this data, and they don't do many things with. They don't take advantage of this. And we are trying to build what we call the citizen life process. We had so many interesting data about people that we can analyze how people are, the main events of the life of some people. And with that, we could, for example, understand how people were evolving based on these social programs. If you give, for example, the idea of giving some allowance to poor families is that they can put their children in schools, and the children can go to school, and we suppose that they do have a better life than the parents had before, because they don't have because children don't have to work. This is a problem here in Brazil. We have many poor people, and so analyzing if this program is reaching their goals, looking at the logs of these big main events of people. So this is the opposite of the other case, because the other case was a very small process, and we could apply process mining to understand both very small problems. And this is the opposite. This is a huge problem. We are talking about the lives of people, and how can we make them better? And we can also use process mining to do that. But we have to build this log. We have to collect data from different information systems, and we have a lot of different databases, and the events are spread all over them. So it's a very hard work. But they could see that this is real. This would be a real benefit. And again, we cannot imagine how many things we can do with these techniques nowadays.
Yes. And for someone listening right now that maybe they have, this is the first time they're getting introduced to the concept or the topic of process mining, or maybe they have heard about it before, but it hasn't really piqued their interest until now. Where does someone begin with process mining? Because as you've been saying, it's best to start small, to identify somewhere where you can prove value with it and deliver real value through process mining. I guess for someone that's in a large organization with tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of processes, where do you begin? Like where should that person start?
Yes, well, particularly, I always think that we should start with small things, and then we can increase the approaches. But so that's what I would say. If you'd like to start, you should choose something that is under your control, and then you really have a problem there, and you don't know many things about this problem, and then you can start learning about this problem using this kind of techniques. So I would always choose something smaller to start.
And are there any, I guess, prerequisites for process mining? I have heard different people that have, I guess, learnt about the topic or have been introduced to the topic, they might have a few objections of like, oh, I don't think our organization has the right data or has the right resources or enough resources. Are there any prerequisites for using technology like this?
Yes, I think could be, but I think that we can always analyze the context and start thinking what is important in each case. Let me give you another example. I worked with this IT company, and we were analyzing the process of the core process of them that was solving problems of their customers. They have hundreds of contracts with different customers, and they have the infrastructure problems, and they have to address to solve these problems. So when we look at the basic process, we could not see many interesting things, but the real relevant thing was the conversations that people had among them, the technicians with the customers, with the manager, in order to solve the problems. So that's the pain. That's where they really make decisions, and then we should really take care of it. So we had the data. But it's hard to work with unstructured data because it was conversations. We had the exchange of messages among these people. But again, it's the problem. So we have to try to understand what is interesting for them. So we took these logs of conversations, and we tried to understand what they were talking about. So, and how do they make decisions? What are the decision points in this conversation? And why did these decisions? So it's totally different from a structured log where you have a flow of activities, and of course, you have in the decision points also, but you are based on, but these decision points are very much clear, because you know that you have to choose from A or B at this point, and then you go to different paths. But this was totally unstructured. People were discussing a problem, and then they use their experience, their knowledge, the things that they knew before, other cases that they had in the past. So it's and this is the point. Sometimes in these conversations, they got into loops. They could not get out of a loop of conversation, and this is the problem they had to face. Why did this happen? So we used process mining also to try to understand this, but our log was not made of activities, was made of messages exchanged among people, and then we mapped these messages to what we call the different intentions about this message within these messages that were exchanged, and we tried to understand why the decisions were made, which were the decisions, and why they made this decision at that point. So that's it. Sometimes it's not so obvious. It's not like the traditional things, but we have to go into go deep in the problem and try to see what is your pain. Your pain is, and from my point of view, I studied this kind of knowledge intensive processes. This is what we call knowledge intensive processes, this kind of processes that are not maybe it's not logged in the traditional information systems, but it's the things that people that depends on people, depends on how people, the knowledge of people and their experiences. And now we have many opportunities to do that, because people are interacting using collaborative systems all the day, every time. So we can use this kind of information also to improve the processes. And this is the things that I'm working on nowadays in my research.
That's great. That's good. And when you look to the future, because obviously, I mean, you would have seen the BPM landscape change quite a bit over the last, say, 20 years. When you look towards the future, where what do you think organizations need to be focusing on, or what do you think the future of BPM looks like? Obviously, you know, we've discussed RPA, we've discussed process mining. I believe that as more and more organizations adopt this technology, that they're going to see that real tangible value. Well, I guess what's beyond that, or what is the future of that?
I think, well, as you said, we have many different techniques and technologies to support things that are, let me see, that we know how to do, and then we can automate them using RPA, and we can extract knowledge based on this data. But I think what BPM should take care is about how people interact, how people collaborate. I think collaboration is something that is never out of fashion. So every all the time we have to think about collaboration. In my opinion, even more now, because we have to, for companies to be flexible and innovative. People have to be flexible and be innovative. And so how can they do that if they're not collaborating with each other? So I think
Right.
social BPM should be on focus. Social BPM, because you have to support people to collaborate and leave all the other stuff to robots. So BPM should also take care of people. That's what I'm saying. And
Yes.
this leads me again to the topic of ethics, because it's totally related to ethics. So
Yes.
what people do, and how they interact with each other, how they build things together. So I think everything is very related.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. And when I guess as we move into the future, we are going to see jobs change, and I feel like we've been seeing jobs change more increasingly so, or more rapidly as technology becomes more advanced. And I mean, technology has always changed. If you look back through human history, there's always been a new invention or a new creation, which means humans can do a task more efficiently or effectively. But now what we're finding is, you know, a lot of the jobs that are currently around today are going to be totally different in 5-10 years time. So how, as people, and I guess I'm talking on behalf of the audience that are going to be listening to this, as people who are in organizations helping to manage and improve and optimize business processes, and that may look like using robots to conduct processes and things like that. How do you work with or collaborate with these process performers or process participants that have been doing this job for the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years? And we're coming along saying there is a better way. You know, I feel like it's got to be done carefully or delicately, because what we're asking that person to do is totally change what they've been doing and what they've been enjoying doing. But in a lot of cases, probably stuff that tedious, repetitive tasks that maybe they haven't been enjoying. But I guess, how do you bring those people on board so that they feel empowered, they feel that they're excited about the change, and they're not resistant to the change? Because I think that can be a challenge or a hurdle.
Yes, it's as you said, this is a very delicate topic, because we have to. It's not easy to tell a person that it has been doing something for many years, probably, that this job does not exist anymore. And many times this person is not going to be reallocated in the company. He or she will simply lose his job. So this is something that we have to deal with. I think the obvious thing is to think about education. We have to re-educate these people to do other things. The point is, which other things? Because
Right.
we don't know. First, because we don't know which will be the future jobs. And second, because probably these people, at least here in my context, are not being are not prepared to do these big changes. They were not well educated to do this. One
Right.
thing that I, I I feel like we can do is to start with these people, is to start some educational program. I think we should re-educate people to do other kinds of tasks, and we can do it now because we with the tasks that we know that are necessary now, and they have to deal with all these new technologies. This is first of all is very important, but of course we can we should also work with the educational system since the beginning. So what we are doing here is trying to introduce this kind of things in schools, so we can make the young people to start thinking about this from now. What will I do? What will be a job that I would like to do and that will exist in the future?
Yes, right.
So I think this is, I think in summary, I think education is the key for this.
Yes, yes. And I guess on the topic of education, for those that have been listening to this conversation today and they maybe they want to explore what BPM can do for their organization, maybe you've piqued their interest, or maybe they've had an idea of what BPM is, but you've kind of, I guess, helped them to think beyond what they have known in the past of what's possible. Where should that person go now to learn more? That they're someone within an organization, a large organization, maybe that they're even in a position where they have been tasked to improve a particular area or group of processes. They want to learn more about BPM and how they can adopt it and implement it well. Where would you encourage them to go?
I think one great initiative is the BPM Association. BPM Association has been promoting some really interesting seminars with people from different backgrounds, from research, from professional, and so I think this would be very, very interesting to see these new topics, these hot topics that are being considered now in BPM. So I suggest that get associated and enjoy these seminars that they are promoting now. I think this is one good start. Of course, there are many others. There are books and conferences, events, but I think this particular, I think this kind of initiative that you see people discussing, interacting, promoting a debate about some hot topic in BPM is really nice, because you get to know not only the ideas of these people, but the topics itself, the things that are being that are hot right now.
Yes, yes, that's great. Well, Flavia, I just want to thank you on behalf of the community for sitting down with us today and sharing your knowledge and experience with us. Obviously, I mean, we've been talking for a little over 40 minutes now, but there's only so little or so much we can fit into a conversation like this. But I guess the main goal is to pique interest, to spark interest, to get people thinking that, like, well, understanding and managing your business processes is really important and can deliver a lot of value to an organization, can help solve a lot of problems and challenges. And so I think this conversation has definitely been of value to myself. I've been taking a lot of notes and learning a lot, and I know that our audience will have learned a lot as well. So I just want to thank you for sitting down with me today.
Thank you so much, Daniel. It was really a pleasure to be here with you.